All right, so about a week ago, I covered that article written by a guy named Lucas Kunz, and he wrote an article that was basically outlining why the Afghanistan war was a completely failed project, and he was giving the reasons, as a former Marine as he is, why he opposed the war from the beginning. And so he actually went on MSNBC on Stephanie Ruhl's show, and Stephanie Ruhl is one of the most ridiculous corporate ghouls that I've ever seen on mainstream media, but he educates her very adequately here. And so I wanted to play you this clip of him basically giving his take on our exit from Afghanistan and a lot of the other takes that we have seen from the generals and the intelligence officials who have lied to us over the last 20 years, now coming out of the woodwork to criticize the withdrawal. So I'm going to play you this clip, and then we're going to discuss his actual run for the Missouri Senate, which he has recently announced. So let's go ahead and listen to what his take was here.
I do want to play for you what Congressman Peter Meyer, a veteran who went to Kabul last week, what he said about his trip. Watch this.
I mean, we've seen some of the best of the American people, especially in the last 2 weeks, some of the best of our troops on the ground and the heroic way they're carrying out this mission. But we've also seen some of the worst of American leadership.
Do you agree?
Look, well, I absolutely agree about the troops. The people who are over there doing this evacuation in very dangerous conditions, as you've seen, are doing absolutely the bravest, most impossible job in the world, and I'm very proud of them. But as far as the overall picture goes, here's the deal. All these people are playing the blame game right now over what's happening right now because they want to distract us from the fact that we spent 20 years, $2.3 trillion, and 2,500 U.S. service member lives over there for absolutely nothing. Like the same people right now who are saying, one more day, one more month, one more dollar, are the same people who said that for 20 years. And what we saw last week, what that means is one more Marine. It means one more Marine over and over again. It reminds me of the saddest day of my entire life, which was standing on the flight line in Helmand, Afghanistan, in the middle of the night, watching the fallen body of one of the members of my battalion loaded onto a transport plane to go home. These people are trying to keep us focused on what's happening right now because they have been telling the American people that it was worthwhile to spend $2.3 trillion over there for absolutely nothing, while they've been refusing to spend that much building up our own country here at home, and we can't let them win. We have to fight back against that narrative because it's wrong, and it's just part of the systematic institutional dishonesty that has us in this position right now.
Right. So he's 100% right in that entire take. Okay. And so from the beginning, right, it actually helps to have a former Marine give this kind of take. Right. And there are obviously many former military members who are outspoken anti-war advocates, anti-imperialist, left flank veterans. Has a great Twitch channel if you want to go check them out or follow them on Twitter. But yeah, it really does help to have former Marines, former service members give these kinds of takes because it gives that insider perspective. It's not just people who are commentating and trying to, backseat quarterback, I guess, a lot of the things that have happened over the course of this war. You have somebody who was literally on the ground experiencing these things firsthand, and he's describing that it was not worth it. And the same people who lied to us over the last 20 years are again now coming out of the woodwork and pretending like, they have the ability to give an honest or accurate analysis of the exit from Afghanistan. And so the statistic that actually stood out to me after the aftermath of that attack that happened at the Kabul airport by that ISIS-K suicide bomber was literally all of the members of the U.S. military who were killed in that attack. There was about 13 of them that ended up dying in it, and literally all of them were between the ages of about 20 to 30. So that means literally all of them who died in that attack as we were exiting Afghanistan were children when the war was started. And so there are a lot of cynical actors who come out and they use their deaths. They have been using those service members' deaths as a justification to try to drag another generation to this endless, pointless war. And so it's nice to have voices that are actually coming out and pushing back against that and are saying, no, stop listening to all of these motherfuckers who have lied over the last 20 years. We need to be holding these people accountable, not listening to them on their advice on how we need to, it was because the Taliban was embarrassing us on our way out, so we need to send more troops back in to go do another surge or something like that. This is the actual accurate take that you should be hearing on all of mainstream media. And so now we get to his actual run for Senate. And so in my last video where I was talking about the article that he wrote, I actually didn't know that he was running for Senate. But yeah, apparently he is, and he's running for Senate in Missouri. And here's how he identifies himself in his bio, which I thought was kind of interesting. So 13-year Marine veteran, Afghanistan/Iraq, war veteran, arms control negotiator, national security expert, antitrust advocate, and he identifies himself as a populist running for U.S. Senator. So it's interesting that he identifies himself as populist because that's a pretty politically charged word, right? So, I mean, you could call, people like Kyle Kalinske like to call themselves like members of the populist left, which I kind of get because a populist leftist is somebody who believes in policies that are overwhelmingly supported by the American people. They support things like Medicare for all. They support things like, legalizing marijuana. They appeal to popularity on many of these issues, but they also happen to be right on a lot of issues. Now, there are also Republicans on the right who call themselves populist or like to pretend to be populist. Somebody who comes to mind is Josh Hawley, who also happens to be from Missouri. And so you have this dichotomy here where it can be confusing when somebody identifies himself as a populist. You don't really know. Are they a right-wing populist, which in my opinion is something that is non-existent, at least at the elected level. There are no right-wing populists that exist in the U.S. Congress, okay? Josh Hawley, he's not a populist. He, in the wake of pulling out of Afghanistan, was calling for us to stay in Afghanistan. He was lambasting Biden after praising Trump for initiating the pullout procedure. He's a complete fraud, if there ever was going to be somebody who could be called a fraud in the populist sense of the word. And so often is the case that right-wing populists actually turn out to be fascists, okay? So we got to be careful when people identify themselves as populists. But I was actually looking at his On the Issues page on his campaign website, and he leaves a couple of specifics out of here, but generally it seems like he's kind of right on a lot of these issues. So I just wanted to walk you through this because I was just kind of curious in looking at this. So he wants to apparently end monopoly domination of his economy, and he appeals to the free market in this paragraph here, which I don't really agree with in a lot of senses, because typically when Republicans or when conservatives talk about, or even liberals talk about the free market, what they really mean is the freedom for gigantic corporations to exploit people within the free market or supposed free market. There is no such thing as a truly free market under a capitalist system, at least in my opinion. As a socialist, capitalism is an inherently authoritarian structure of an economy, right? You have a handful of people who sit at the top of the corporations that get to dominate and control what the rest of the workforce does. And the rest of the workforce, which makes up the vast majority of people, have no say. There is no democratic processes, and it is therefore authoritarian. So it does kind of worry me when people appeal to the free market. But moving on to his other policy positions, because there can be some people who are good on other issues, even if they're not good on that side of it. So abolishing corporate PACs and safeguarding democracy. So anybody who wants to abolish corporate PACs and doesn't want to accept corporate money is, that's a bonus in my eyes, at least. Enacting a Marshall Plan for the Midwest, so wants to rebuild and invest in things like infrastructure, and then achieving universal health care. So he does leave out in this paragraph Medicare for all, which is something that I would think if you genuinely supported universal health care. We know how this phrase has been co-opted by many people who don't actually believe in universal health care, and they just like to use that phrase. Even Joe Biden comes out and says he's in favor of universal health care, even though we all know that he's not actually in favor of it. But he does talk about the profit motive and how that can be problematic in here. So I don't know what his actual position is on healthcare, but he doesn't mention Medicare for all in this. He does bring up Black Lives Matter in a favorable way, which is kind of surprising, not going to lie, and protecting LGBTQ plus Americans. He's also in favor of legalizing marijuana, which is a massive bonus, at least in my eyes. Fighting for workers, he seems like he's very pro-union, which is also fantastic. Breaking up big agriculture, investing in education, securing equality for women, protecting Social Security, and etc., keeping our promises to veterans. So listen, I'll leave it up to you guys. I'll link that down in the description if you want to go look more at his issues. I'm not asking you to go support him or fund his campaign or anything like that. I just kind of thought it was interesting that somebody who has very based takes on from an anti-war perspective is running for U.S. Senate. So go look into him if you live in Missouri and decide what you will about this guy. But yeah, he's 100% right on his take. The same people who lied to us over the last 20 years of this war in Afghanistan are now trying to portray themselves as some sort of experts on how the withdrawal should have actually happened. And we shouldn't be listening to them. We should be holding them accountable.